This is Colin Dixon, and I'm at TV Connect in London. This is 2015, and it's, another TV Connect. And I'm talking with John Maguire, who is Chief Strategy Officer of S3 Group. And John, you just participated in a very interesting panel on the future of the set-top box. And you said something right at the beginning of the panel that I thought was very interesting. You said that set-top boxes changed forever when they became two-way devices. Why did they change forever?
Well, Colin, that was the point at which the set-top box stopped being an endpoint of a broadcast network and became part of a much larger end-to-end delivery platform, a two-way connected platform with a full range of services, and that opened up the potential to move some of that functionality to different points in the network. And that was a very fundamental change point. It also enabled a lot more software to be deployed across the network, and that allowed a lot more functionality to roll out.
So it also allowed for a quite different software model, right? Before, we saw software on a set-top box was sold very differently to the way it's delivered and thought about now, right? On those two-way boxes.
Yeah, well, this is something we were talking about on the panel. In our experience, traditionally in our industry, software has effectively almost been sold as hardware. So this distinction between what was fixed and couldn't be changed in the field versus what was software and in theory should have been easy to change wasn't so clear, and it was typical in those days for software vendors to respond to requests for changes by saying, yes, we can change that, of course, because it's software, but it's going to take a very, very long time, and it's going to be very, very hard. What we're seeing now is a change to that, far more software, far faster innovation, move towards more agile development models that allow changes to flow much quicker from a concept, from the market demand, from customer demand, from changing patterns of consumption and the types of content that people are looking to consume and where they're looking to consume it. The time from that demand change to it being realized as new functionality on the end devices is shrinking every day.
And that actually sort of dovetails into something Gideon Schmuel of iSight said on the panel. He said that the experience will come from the software, not necessarily from the hardware. So would you agree with what he said?
Yeah, broadly I would agree with it. Clearly, a lot of the differentiation now happens at the higher layers of the software stack. So the low layers, a lot of the problems, the fundamental problems in delivering audio and video efficiently to many people around the world have been solved. The core problems about how do you deliver really high quality experience content around the world at the low layers of the software stack, that's well on the way to being solved. It's definitely well understood in terms of what the problem domain is. So for sure, innovation has moved to the higher layers of the software stack, up to the application layers. I wouldn't completely agree that the hardware has become, let's say, commoditized, though. We still regularly see very innovative new hardware form factors. We see new capabilities in the hardware. We see longer life systems for more mobile usage. So I think there's still a lot of room to innovate in the hardware. I certainly see an awful lot of innovation at the higher layers of the software stack, because that's where pretty much all of the innovation happens. I think the bit that we would agree has become standardized and more commoditized is the lower layers of the software stack, where we can just work better as a group together rather than trying to compete at those low layers.
So let's talk a little bit about what's actually happening with the hardware. Where is the innovation coming in the hardware? Because there seems to be two competing forces. Number one is the move to the cloud, where we're pushing processing power and a whole bunch of other rendering functions, etc., into the cloud. Mm-hmm. So that's not actually being run on the set-top box, which means you need less processor, less RAM. But we're also seeing a lot of innovation in the interfaces, which if you do the processing on that, you still end up having to have a lot of processing power. So what's going on? Is a lot of the processing power moving up, or is it going to continue to grow in the set-top box itself?
I think it's basically a redistribution, a refactoring, if you will, of where the various functions involved in delivering content lie in the system. We're still fundamentally, it's a simple problem we're trying to solve, taking content from the ingest point, getting it into the hands of consumers wherever they are at that time. And so as technologies have changed, as the clouds emerged, as we move towards, as we talked about earlier, those IP two-way connectivity into these devices, sure, it makes sense for some functions to move up into the cloud, and that reduces the need for processing power on the client side to perform those functions. However, there's always a demand for more functionality. There's always a demand for more features, richer interfaces, more simultaneous activity on the end devices. So at the same time as we're offloading those functions which can be put centrally, the boffins are coming up with great new features to put in front of consumers that use up those same resources, and indeed even more capable resources on end devices. An example we're seeing certainly starting to hit now is very rich user interfaces. The next generation user interfaces are going to look far more like playing first-person shooter games than they are old-style grid-based EPGs, and that's fantastic because, of course, the next generation of consumers are used to that kind of interface.
So sounds like what you're saying, we're not going to see a diminishing of the processing power and whatnot going on in the set-top box at all, that actually it could continue to grow.
I think again there's going to be a redistribution of where some of that processing power is. We are definitely going to see a strong processing capability in the home. I have no doubt about that at all. Will that be in a gateway device with smaller client devices? Will it be distributed more equally among the various devices? I think that still has to wash out a little bit. But the net, if you were to stand back from the entire system, the net amount of processing power in the home, and this is before we even talk about the gateway to IoT services and medical services and home automation services, the net amount of compute in the home is only going one way, and that's up, I believe.
So all of this, it seems to spell actually greater complexity in the software running on the box. Are operators going to be able to cope with this? Doesn't this mean a ton more bugs and a ton more problems that they're going to have to deal with there?
So problems will arise. There will be problems whenever we have a system. We will have bugs. I was about to say whenever we have software, but that's also not true. Hardware, software, any system will have things that if you could do over, you would of course improve. And the great thing about software is we can improve them. We can fix them on the fly. So there is more complexity. There will be more bugs. I suppose there's two aspects to it. There's time to detect a problem and there's time to resolve a problem. They're the two metrics that we typically look at from an engineering point of view. We're certainly seeing huge innovation in reducing the time to detect problems. So we're seeing much better monitoring, much better active testing throughout the network. We are seeing basically operators putting in place the systems that allow them to know there's a problem before the customer knows there's a problem. So that's the first step. The second step then is meantime to resolve, and that's where the process related changes, how operators are organizing themselves around DevOps teams, around collaborative development, around continuous integration and delivery, those process changes in how they bring software changes to market. That's allowing them to react much quicker when they know what the problem is and bring solutions out into the market quickly.
And of course, they can rely on companies like S3 to help with that debug load, right?
We are always here to help, Colin. Yes, for sure. I mean, that's very clearly the domain we've chosen to focus S3 Group's resources on. We help operators both during development and in operations to get the highest possible end user experience through ongoing quality assurance activities.
Right. Well, John, that was a great panel. Really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thanks very much, Colin.
This has been Colin Dixon with nScreenMedia.